We are and always will be the United States of America.
They form a visible ring around the president.
The best way of looking at the protection of the president is a series of layers.
They are a highly trained guardian force, schooled in history, motivated by tragedy, and wary of each and every potential threat. This is high-stress work, and its dedicated operatives have all signed on to the risk of personal danger. But their work must remain unnoticeable to the public. Their layers of protection must remain invisible. Like their name, the Secret Service. They are armed with an arsenal of protection, unseen by the public. Their tools include specially designed weapons, blinding lasers, bulletproof fabrics, and transparent armor, all ready within a heartbeat.
This was going to be deadly force.
All shrouded in secrecy, all part of the job of protecting the leader of the nation from any harm.
He must be protected at all costs.
How do they do it? These are the secrets of the Secret Service. November 22nd, 1963. President John F. Kennedy and his wife Jackie arrived in Dallas, Texas. It was a day that would shake the nation and forever change the most elite federal law enforcement agency, the Secret Service. The agency that would fail to protect him. The Secret Service does many things: safeguard our currency, protect important U.S. officials and foreign visitors. But its most crucial task revolves around a single purpose and a single person.
They have to take the utmost precaution all the time to protect the President of the United States, who's more important than the individual, actually. He's a representative of the country, the representative of the Constitution, the commander-in-chief of our armed forces. He must be protected at all costs.
Since the Kennedy assassination, the world has only become a more dangerous and complicated place. Threats now are not just a lone gunman, but sophisticated terrorists who operate globally. There is no room for mistakes.
If you are successful for every day for 4 years that he's the president, and on the one day something happens, you lose.
The agency lost that day in Dallas. And in hindsight, the reasons are all too clear. Arriving at the airport, John F. Kennedy was unexpectedly greeted by warm, friendly crowds. But behind the joy was a terrible piling up of mistakes. Number one, over the Secret Service's objections, Kennedy insisted on riding in an open convertible, where he was vulnerable. Mistake number two, the motorcade route passed right through Dealey Plaza, where the president was a wide open target. Number three, in response to political staff, agents who usually surround the limousine were pulled away so people could see the president better. One reacted by throwing up his hands in disgust. 3 times he protested, what would prove to be a fatal error. Kennedy was killed by the 3rd shot from a sniper rifle, well after agents, if they had been nearby, could have pulled him out of harm's way.
Bottom line is that they lost the president, and the agents that were there and took and were responsible at the time have taken that very personally.
Kennedy's death shook the Secret Service.
That was a tragedy for everyone. But like in any tragedy, lessons were learned.
The changes were fundamental and sweeping, and they began in the most obvious place. The car. Presidential limousines started off as carriages pulled by horses, later replaced by cars, and they were usually open. The people wanted to see their president. But Kennedy's assassination prompted a complete redesign of the presidential limo and isolated presidents in a silent, sealed-off cocoon where the outside crowd is only heard through speakers.
They are basically taking a tank and making it look like a car.
The latest limousine, known as the Beast, has a foam-sealed fuel tank that won't explode even with a direct hit. The car is perfectly sealed against biochemical attacks. There is an oxygen supply and firefighting system in the trunk, and reportedly, bottles of the president's blood type. The doors weigh as much as a 757 cabin door, thanks to 8-inch thick armor plating. Remington shotguns are close at hand. The body is made from steel, aluminum, titanium, and a ceramic. Accessories include bumper-mounted night vision camera and tear gas cannons. Run-flat tires keep rolling, even when fully punctured. Called transparent armor, the bulletproof windows are one of the most amazing aspects of the presidential limousine. Of course, the Secret Service refuses to say anything about them. But in Ogden, Utah, International Armoring Corporation harnesses the same technology used in the Beast to custom armor cars like this luxury SUV for billionaires, Hollywood stars, and heads of state. To demonstrate how the ballistic glass works, owner Mark Burton shoots the same transparent armor that is in the SUV at 20 feet, 5 times the Magnum. And this glass is less than half as thick as that in the presidential limousine. The windows begin with layers of heavy glass that absorb the bullet's impact, but generate deadly sharp fragments. The final layers are a plastic. Like a catcher's mitt engulfing a baseball, these elastic sheets stop the bullet completely and any shards of glass.
Some of the rounds that are actually embedded into the ballistic glass itself. But as you can see from the back, the polycarbonate has stopped not only the rounds, but also the fragments of glass.
But would the glass have protected John F. Kennedy? Burton fires a high-powered rifle from 30 feet, much closer than the assassin was to the president.
As you can see, the energy has been dispersed, but yet on the back side, it is very, very smooth. No penetration.
As threats of kidnapping and assassination of prominent or wealthy citizens increase, there has been an international boom in protected vehicles. First, they are stripped down to their basics, all the wires exposed. Steel armor is added, then lighter armor acts, 10 times the strength of ballistic steel, pound for pound. Nylon explosive-resistant cloth is put along the floor to baffle the impact of explosions from below. Metal overlaps seal off the door openings.
What we want to do is make sure there's no angle shots that get in around your doors.
IAC clients have reportedly survived over 250 attacks.
It takes between 3 and 5 seconds for a trained individual to react. It takes the average individual about 10 seconds. And so what these vehicles are designed to do is to provide a safe zone while their mind is configuring, while their mind is figuring out that I'm being attacked. I need to get out of here.
So, if you happen to be pursued by bad guys, IAC also has James Bond devices to protect you. Like these lethal tacks, which are designed to stop a vehicle on your tail. An $850 add-on. The Beast probably doesn't carry tacks to drop out the back. It doesn't need them. The president is surrounded by armed protection.
To be in the motorcade is just a sense of wonderment, and it's a rush. Right in front of me is this car to the back up and some ninja warrior-looking people with very big guns.
The presidential limousine is part of a motorcade of 25 to 30 vehicles. One is a mobile communications center, linking the agents on secure lines.
The rest of the motorcade is 2 armored limousines, each identical copy of the other. One's a decoy, just in case, God forbid, somebody fires, and it's a 50-50 chance that they know which one to fire at. And then you've got all kinds of motorcycles, police cars, Secret Service cars, armored cars, press vehicles, communications vehicles. They move a city, and they move it rather rapidly.
The president is secure as long as he remains within the belly of the Beast. But as soon as he steps out to mingle with the public, the Secret Service goes into overdrive. The presidential limousine has been transformed into an impenetrable cocoon. But outside the armor-plated car, dangers are everywhere. And unpredictable. The agency began protecting the president full-time after President McKinley, who did not have Secret Service protection, was assassinated in 1901. But politicians will always insist on having contact with their constituents, and the Secret Service has to adjust.
In the final analysis, it may come down to that agent standing next to the president who has to react to him. It's what kept us up at night, worrying about how will I react? Will I do the right thing?
Being in the Secret Service is about being paranoid, about making just one mistake that can lose the president. But underneath the sunglasses are human beings.
I think the pressures on agents are multidimensional. I thought about it all the time. I mean, 24 hours a day, you were sort of thinking about it, worrying.
Decisions are made in an instant.
I was a young agent. We were leaving an event heading to Newark Airport. We were going through a small town, little motorcade. I looked up ahead and noticed standing a block or so ahead of us was a person holding a weapon in a combat position, pointing it toward the street. I began to react. I raised the weapon. This was going to be deadly force. This was an Uzi submachine gun, 9mm submachine gun. I was a very good shot. And I noticed in just a flash second that it was a red gun. And something triggered in my own mind that this wasn't natural. I hesitated. I didn't pull the trigger. As we got close, I could see that it was a water pistol. This turned out to be a 15-year-old boy who did it on a dare. Almost lost his life in the process.
The protection of the president is only as good as the highly trained agents who stay close.
I've always felt, when I was responsible for the president, that I wanted to be at least an arm's length of him in public.
In Beltsville, Maryland, the Secret Service strategies are drilled into the presidential detail at a high-security training complex, running scenarios of an attack on the president. Preparing for that one split second of crisis and danger that could occur at any time. And the Secret Service techniques are now used throughout the high-level protection industry.
The basic strategy has always been, in the Secret Service, what we call cover and evacuate. Cover him, get him in the car as quickly as possible, and get him out of there.
But how do these techniques work in real life? Secret Service strategies are flawless in training, and they have been tested to the limit in real assassination attempts. March 30th, 1981, John Hinckley was a 25-year-old with romantic delusions, convinced that actress Jodie Foster would be impressed if he killed the president. Outside the Hilton Hotel in Washington, D.C., Hinckley caught up with his target.
And I don't think there was a better demonstration of how that training worked than the assassination attempt against President Reagan. Jerry Parr and Ray Shattuck, as soon as that first shot goes off, they grab the president and they throw him into the car.
Agent Tim McCarthy shielded Reagan with his body, taking a bullet in the process. Within moments, the limo sped away from a scene of chaos. Hinckley was buried under a mountain of Secret Service agents. Agent McCarthy, Press Secretary James Brady, and D.C. policeman Thomas Delahanty lay on the sidewalk, severely injured. All three survived, but Brady had permanent brain damage.
The old saying that, a Secret Service agent will take a bullet for the president. If you look at the Reagan assassination, Tim McCarthy did do that, but he was trained to do that as well, and his heroic actions demonstrate that.
Although the agents around the president reacted heroically, many mistakes had been made. The Secret Service relies on a perimeter system of protection. The outer is a preliminary check by local police. The middle has Secret Service agents searching for weapons.
And then there's the inner perimeter, and that's the final defense. It's the agents around the president.
Hinckley had penetrated two of the perimeters, and fired at least 5 shots at point-blank range. The Secret Service had been trying for years to get metal detectors to screen for weapons. They got authorization days later. The perimeters were tightened, and the idea of an open arrival and departure ended after the attempt against President Reagan.
We used to take the president in always in through the loading docks of hotels, never through the lobby. And we could clear the whole loading dock. And I remember Reagan getting out of the car one day at a hotel and turned and said, you know, if I ever got out of the car and didn't smell garbage, I was thinking I was at the wrong place, you know. I mean, he made a joke out of it.
Agents studied film of incidents around the world, like the assassination of Egyptian President Anwar Sadat in 1981. And there were other changes. Counter-snipers are now placed on rooftops around the outer perimeter, and the president's route is more carefully advanced. Although they may be vigilant, agents keep the space around the president calm. One method is to keep their weapons hidden. In fact, we've only seen them draw their guns in public a few times. Once was during the assassination attempt on President Ronald Reagan. An agent pulled an Uzi submachine gun out of a briefcase. Uzis have a tendency to spray their shots, and if used, could endanger bystanders. The Secret Service has since switched to the very accurate FN P90 submachine gun.
One of the advantages of the P90, as you can see, is it's very controllable.
But the P90 has another advantage. It fires very light 5.7 by 28 millimeter ammunition, especially developed to pierce body armor. In 1997, a bank robbery in Los Angeles saw body-armored gunmen subduing the police and roaming the streets at will.
So that type of scenario is a nightmare for the Secret Service.
It took over 200 police to subdue the 2 robbers. The Secret Service realized they had to be able to strike back. The P90 is the scientific solution to body armor, another escalation in the arms race between the Secret Service and potential assassins. But most of the agents around the president are carrying the workhorse of the Secret Service, the Sig Sauer P229 automatic pistol. Made in New Hampshire, the P229 comes from the marriage of Swiss and German arms makers. The science is in the tolerances, which can be as fine as 1/10,000th of an inch. And before each P229 leaves the factory, the weapon is test-fired repeatedly. It must be perfectly reliable.
The gun business is a very conservative business. Our customers, such as the Secret Service, will not want to touch a system that hasn't been proven for many years.
But at close range, deadly force is not the only option available. New technology provides a non-lethal alternative. It is made by a small independent company in Hartford, Connecticut, conceived and founded by Titus Kazaza. The Laser Dazzler can temporarily block an assailant's vision and has been used in Iraq to stop suspicious vehicles without having to fire on them. Lasers are one color only. The light is so focused it can be used in eye surgery, and so powerful it can cut steel. Used carefully by trained agents, laser dazzlers could shield a president behind a green wall with minimum risk to the potential threat or innocent bystanders. But while the laser dazzler can neutralize a sniper up to even a few hundred yards, the president is still vulnerable at great distance. Never more than when he is in the air, and the danger is attacked by a weapon we created, the Stinger missile. It is the iconic image of the president striding across the White House lawn to jump into Marine One. The Black Hawk helicopters in use now were introduced in 1979. They're a bargain at about $15 million each.
To me, the most interesting thing about Marine One is it's a helicopter, and you can talk in a whisper on the helicopter and still be heard.
The problem with a helicopter is that it can be shot down relatively easily. And the Black Hawk, workhorse of American ground forces, has been numerous times.
This proliferation of heat-seeking anti-aircraft weapons, shoulder-fired missiles, is probably the most dangerous development for the Secret Service.
Ironically, the threat comes originally from the United States.
Back in the 80s, we had provided Stinger missiles to the Afghan resistance to the Soviet Union. It was always a great concern that some of those missiles had fallen into the wrong hands and they might be being used against the president or other targets.
There are 30,000 parts in a Black Hawk helicopter, and over 200 are what is called flight critical. It takes just one failure to bring the copter down, or just one projectile. To protect against this possibility, Marine One always flies in groups of up to 5 identical helicopters.
Sort of the 3 cups, you know, the guy that moves the 3 cups around. You know, I mean, it's the same concept, is that you want to try to disguise whatever helicopter he may be in, and that's been an effective way to do that.
While Marine One can be part of what is called the presidential shell game, there is no way to disguise Air Force One. This Boeing 747 is 6 stories tall, with the capability of staying aloft indefinitely with air-to-air refueling. The 4,000 square feet of floor space include a suite for the president, infirmary with operating table, conference room, offices, and an area for the press. But the exact layout is a closely guarded secret. Air Force One is powered by 4 CF-6 ADC-2 jet engines, each rated at 56,750 pounds of thrust. The plane cruises at 610 miles per hour. Extensive testing makes sure the jets perform efficiently in the worst weather conditions. Still, the same Stinger shoulder-mounted missiles that the Taliban used to shoot down helicopters in Afghanistan can bring down Air Force One.
About 5 years ago, an al-Qaeda operation shot a heat-seeking missile at an aircraft in Mombasa, Kenya, and fortunately missed. So that is one of those scenarios that's still out there, that's been attempted recently, and is a nightmare for the Secret Service.
On September 11th, 2001, the Secret Service thought it might be facing that very possibility. America was under attack, and Air Force One had become the White House.
And so Air Force One flew up to 45,000 feet and went into something that I think was practiced during the Cold War, part of the Cold War planning, which was just flying randomly in the sky.
President George W. Bush wanted to return to Washington immediately, but now the Secret Service was in charge.
It's not a movie, and if something, God forbid, ever happened to the president, can you imagine how much deeper the crisis gets? So that's why you yield to the Secret Service.
With the fortress of the Pentagon still smoldering, the Capitol was not yet considered safe. For the first time over American soil, Air Force One had a fighter escort. Finally, after 9 hours and 2 stops at secure Air Force bases, President Bush returned to Washington and talked to the nation from the Oval Office.
Terrorist attacks can shake the foundations of our biggest buildings, but they cannot touch the foundation of America.
But a crucial lesson had been learned. Air Force One has to be ready to be the center of American government in an emergency. While he was airborne on 9/11, President Bush had been unable to broadcast from the plane. Now, a new communication system makes Air Force One as technologically up-to-date as the White House. What 9/11 showed, in stunningly clear relief, was that the Secret Service faces a new kind of threat.
And the audacity of that attack has changed everything and up the ante for counterterrorism and security officials around the world.
Since 9/11, the Secret Service sees potential threats everywhere, even in the place that should be the president's safest haven, his own home, the White House. The White House has 132 rooms and sits on 18 acres, and the ways to protect it are highly classified. Just below the Oval Office in the West Wing is the Secret Service White House headquarters. It is the center of the bubble that surrounds the president's family. The walls are protected by radiation detectors. Each lock demands a key and a special trick to open. Panic buttons, disguised as statues or hidden in drawers, are in many rooms. Underground motion sensors are scattered throughout the White House lawn. Counter snipers watch silently, prepared to bring down any would-be assassins.
The White House has a great deal of what we call standoff. It's difficult for any vehicle to get close to the White House. The White House has great control over the immediate vicinity of the 18 acres that are around the White House, which gives it a great deal of security.
The first attempt on a president at home was directed at President Harry Truman by two Puerto Rican nationalists in 1950. Truman was staying across the street in Blair House, while the White House underwent renovation. After a fierce shootout, one assassin, Griselio Torresola, lay dead on the sidewalk, killed by a Secret Service officer, Leslie Kofelt, who himself died in surgery 3.5 hours later, the only member of the agency slain during an attack on the president. There was blood on the sidewalk in front of Blair House, but the White House itself seemed invulnerable. Still, people try to pierce the bubble. In 1994, a mentally unstable veteran, Francisco Duran, fired shots from a semi-automatic rifle at a man in a suit that he thought was President Bill Clinton. In fact, Clinton was inside watching a football game.
You had a little competition here. The president wanted to watch what was happening, and the agent wanted to get him away from the window.
Duran was able to get off 29 shots before bystanders, not the Secret Service, subdued him. Now advanced science could speed up agents' reaction time. Boomerang sniper detection is based on 7 strategically placed microphones. Whether it is in use at the White House is classified, but it would make sense. Boomerang is supposed to be able to detect a sniper shot, and in under a second, tell the exact location of the shooter, even from a moving vehicle. Testing the unit on a firing range in Massachusetts demonstrates how well it works.
Shot 2 o'clock. Shot 2 o'clock. Shot 2 o'clock. 110 meters.
Dave Schmidt is the project manager who helped push through the final development of Boomerang in less than 3 months for delivery to the front lines of Iraq. He follows the sniper detector's instructions.
Gotcha.
Exactly where Boomerang predicted. The real genius of Boomerang comes not from the microphones, but from the software that analyzes what they hear. It depends on the subtle difference between 2 sounds: the muzzle blast, which surrounds the shooter, and the shock wave left behind by the supersonic bullet.
The muzzle blast is familiar to most people. It sounds like a bang. The shock wave, on the other hand, sounds like a crack.
As the sniper bullet blasts through space, faster than the speed of sound, it creates a shock wave, shaped like an ever-expanding ice cream cone. Boomerang hears the crack of the shock wave. The microphones also record the bang of the muzzle blast, which moves in an ever-expanding sphere. The software analyzes the tiny variation between the arrival times of the 2 sounds to find the shooter in less than a second. At the same time, Boomerang can distinguish between a similar sound like a car backfire or firecracker and a gunshot. This is crucial in a noisy urban battlefield like Iraq or traffic-clogged Washington, D.C. But Boomerang would not protect the president from the most serious threat, the air. This was made abundantly clear when Frank Eugene Corder crashed a single-engine Cessna into the White House in an attempt to kill President Clinton. The first family was not home at the time. An unemployed truck driver whose wife had just left him, Corder was the only casualty. But the incident provoked widespread criticism of the Secret Service. Why didn't they shoot the Cessna down?
The plane, if you did neutralize it, it still has to go somewhere. It's not going to vaporize. So you still have all the fuselage, the engine, the wings going somewhere.
The White House was empty at the time, and it is very close to the mall, which is usually packed with tourists.
You're going to have all these things coming down to Earth without any warning to those citizens. They're not going to be able to get out of the way of it. So you're going to have a 300-pound engine going at 200 to 300 miles an hour. Could do tremendous damage.
7 years later, in 2001, the Secret Service was facing a much bigger threat than a Cessna, a Boeing 757. As Agent Joseph Funk was arriving on September 11, 2001, the White House was just being cleared. It wasn't an orderly evacuation. No one knew how many planes were still in the sky.
We were armed with some automatic weapons, shotguns, our sidearms. But how would you stop a plane?
Now the defenses have been updated. Anti-aircraft missiles are almost certainly mounted around the White House.
After 9/11, with a hijacked large jets full of fuel, the threat of that coming to the White House is one that's very difficult to defend against. And quite frankly, the primary defense against that type of threat goes back to the airport.
Airport security is now directly linked to protecting the president, and the newest screening uses three-dimensional technology based on medical CAT scans to detect explosives and weapons in baggage.
So we're going to take a lump of a plastic explosive. We're going to put it inside this radio, packing it as it would be in a regular bag.
A gantry spinning at 120 revolutions per minute uses multiple X-rays to record thousands of images of a suitcase from every angle. A computer program processes the data instantly to determine the density of every item. As unique as a fingerprint, the density instantly tells the machine whether an object is harmless toothpaste or a deadly bomb. But after all the dollars spent on advanced technology, the greatest danger is the simplest and hardest to prevent. The lone gunman. The specter of assassination has been etched in the American psyche since the death of Abraham Lincoln in public at Ford's Theater. Even in a fast-changing world a century and a half later, some of the dangers are familiar.
A lone gunman who's not part of an organization, very hard to detect. If he's determined to really get after the president, that's the most difficult thing for the Secret Service, because it could be anyone.
On September 5th, 1975, Lynette Squeaky Fromm, a devotee of cult leader Charles Manson, slipped into the crowd around President Gerald Ford in Sacramento, California. She pulled the trigger of a .45, but the chamber was empty. She was squeezing the trigger on a loaded chamber when Agent Larry Boondorf got to her.
He reacted courageously and grabbed the gun, but just luckily his thumb stopped the hammer. I mean, that's just luck.
16 days later, Sarah Jane Moore was interviewed by the Secret Service as a potential threat. They concluded she was harmless. The next day, Moore fired a shot from a revolver at President Ford in San Francisco.
And you watch the agents around Ford getting him into the car, just like the Reagan assassination. Boom him in the car and get him out of there.
Both Sarah Jane Moore and Squeaky Fromm are now out of prison and under careful Secret Service supervision. But the memory of Lee Harvey Oswald, the lone sniper who killed President Kennedy, still haunts the agency. Now, the Secret Service has counter-snipers to protect the president against a distant gunman. But as new and better rifles enter the market, their range has to keep getting longer and longer.
It's a magazine-fed bolt-action .308 caliber rifle. Effective range is about 800 to 1,000 meters.
According to news accounts, in 2002, a Canadian sniper fired at a Taliban fighter in Afghanistan at 2,430 meters. over 1.5 miles. The bullet was in the air for an estimated 4 seconds and was deadly accurate.
The things that affect the bullet are primarily gravity and resistance from atmospheric conditions such as wind or humidity in the air. Because of that, you have to compensate, and the way we compensate is by adjusting the scopes. We're down here in front of the backstop at our steel targets that we were shooting at. If you look back up the road up there, back just to the left of the far telephone pole is our shooting position. It's approximately 5 football fields from here to there, so 500 yards. It's a pretty long shot.
Preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States.
Preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States.
So help you God?
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. President.
I think every president of the United States, when he swears into office on the 20th of January, recognizes that he's a target to a range of threats that are out there and that he will always be vulnerable.
And the worry is never higher than when the president steps off Air Force One onto foreign soil. Danger is everywhere, but overseas, the agency does not have absolute control, and the president is at his most vulnerable.
The reality is that once we leave the shores of the United States, the Secret Service has no jurisdiction, we have no authority. We really have to depend on the local law enforcement community.
In 2008, in Iraq, a journalist threw not 1, but 2 shoes at President Bush. A storm of controversy erupted as people wondered why the president had not been better protected. Before President Bush was dodging shoes, he had a much closer brush with death. In Tbilisi, Georgia, the Secret Service and Georgian security were overwhelmed by the large crowd. Vladimir Arutunian threw a live Soviet-made RGD-5 hand grenade next to the podium. Fortunately, a red plaid handkerchief wrapped tightly around the grenade kept the firing pin from deploying. The handkerchief had been the only disguise Arutunian had used to hide the weapon. Sometimes the president's fate simply comes down to chance. Nevertheless, every precaution must be taken. When President Bill Clinton traveled to Pakistan in 2000, the Secret Service knew al-Qaeda had infiltrated the Pakistani military.
Clinton went to Pakistan against the advice of the Secret Service. They didn't want him to go. They used decoy airplanes. They actually brought him in on a much smaller version of Air Force One.
Then, they had 5 presidential limousines leave the airport. Only a trusted few knew which contained the American president.
I think the best way of looking at the protection of the president is a series of layers. And it starts by destroying organizations before they're able to organize a plot. Then as you get closer to the president in physical proximity, whether it's in the air or vehicle or then right next to him, you have layers of protection.
So the search continues for new technologies, anything to gain an advantage on the potential assassin. And the protection cannot get much closer than the president's clothes. After the assassination attempt, President Reagan wore a bulletproof vest.
I have put the vest on the president a few times. It was out of an abundance of caution. I wasn't necessarily concerned that he was in a dangerous situation. Once or twice, Mrs. Reagan actually intervened and asked if he could wear the vest.
It is rumored that President Obama was wearing a bulletproof suit during the inauguration. Of course, the Secret Service will say nothing about the matter. But if he was, it almost certainly came from Miguel Caballero, the world's high-fashion manufacturer of protective armor. Caballero has taken advantage of the war between drug cartels and the government in his native Colombia to create a new technology of fabric design.
El secreto de lograr llegar a que la prenda sea blindada.
The secret of what we do is to mix a hybrid of polyester and nylon, which can absorb energy. The basic principle of bulletproofing is absorbing energy.
To ensure his employees understand the importance of their work, Caballero personally shoots each one from close range in one of his products. High-fashion body armor is big business, and the world's best stores, like Harrods of London, compete to carry Caballero's line. These jackets, suits, and even polo shirts can stop a .357 Magnum, a 9mm, or an Uzi. Tourists actually trek to Caballero's factory, begging to be shot in one of his signature garments. The Secret Service is constantly investigating the range of new protective technology, whether it is Caballero's clothes or LRADs, long-range acoustic devices that emit sound levels many times higher than any heavy metal concert.
They were used by a luxury ship recently against pirates. They had one of these acoustic devices that just launched a sound wave at the pirates that were approaching the ship, and that stopped them right there in the water.
What stopped the pirates in Somalia was that the LRAD can be very, very loud. American Technologies Vice President Nacho Lopez personally demonstrates just how loud.
I'm about 100 yards away from the LRAD right now, and even at this distance, the sound pressure level is pretty intense. I don't want to stand around here much longer.
120 decibels is considered to be the threshold of pain. We're around 10 to 12 times louder than that even.
Based in San Diego, California, American Technologies is a small maverick company that had a very good idea.
When I create a sound like that with my finger, what I'm doing is I'm creating a pressure wave that goes out in all directions, radially. In the LRAD, we prevent the sound from going in all directions by guiding the sound out the front and towards the target.
Because the LRAD is so directional, a person can stand next to it and be perfectly safe. LRADs are in use around the world, wherever there is the potential for conflict or danger. And now, they come in all sizes.
This is our LRAD 1000X. It's the original system. It's our largest, most powerful hailer. This is our LRAD 500X. It's our middle-sized unit. It was developed for use on vehicles and small boats. The LRAD 100X could be used by the Secret Service to do things such as enforce exclusion zones or keep-out zones. If they wanted to keep people out of a certain area, they could use this LRAD to send a very loud, clear, authoritative message.
The message can be a stern warning.
You may be subject to arrest or other enforcement action.
A PSYOPs tactic to annoy. Or a noise that hurts your ears and just might protect the president. Since the death of President Kennedy in 1963, the Secret Service has instituted a constant program of change, researching new technologies, testing and adapting new and more powerful weapons, developing better organization and human resources. But in the end, it all comes down to trust in the institution.
We are and always will be the United States of America.
When President Obama can have an event with, like on election night, with massive throngs, massive crowds, and he looks like he's all alone, it's because the Secret Service said it's okay to be like that. We'll keep you safe.